We're back. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Microsoft
Hey.
Security Insight Show. It is July 12th. It's 2:05 p.m. Mountain Time, 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're back from Canadian U.S. holidays. So welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Andrea, Edward, how are you? And we'll introduce our guest host in a moment here.
Yeah, Andrew, you want to go first?
Sure. I feel like I've been gone forever. I was out for 2 weeks on vacay. This is a big Microsoft vacation time. So I was out both Wednesdays, but happy to be back and see my favorite people. Edward, what have you been doing all day?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. I had a juror thing on.
Fun.
Peel it off and threw it. Not too much. Sort of felt icky early on, but feel better now. Don't know what that was about. Um, not too much. I cannot remember the last week and a half. What's going on? I really can't. That holiday on a Tuesday, it just threw me completely off. Took some time off at the same time, and just a lot of personal stuff. Not very much technical. Nothing that I'm being paid to do anyway. Um, I'm balancing personal projects, but other than that, everything's pretty good. Um, Put some real clothes on today because I had to, but it's too hot to go outside. Golly, I mean, even the birds are walking. They don't even want to fly. They're just walking outside. Um, that's it. It's been pretty uneventful when you really tied into Microsoft this time of year. Like Andrea said, you go into like a little ghost period where everything sort of goes about. But that's it. Feel like I my energy down a little bit. It'll be back up though. And but I have been looking, at a lot of announcements, and I think that's it. What about you, Brody?
Yeah, cool. Well, things are going well over here. I've got my normal assortment of customers that I'm working with, and it sounds like I'll be meeting with a customer on site for the next few weeks and potentially longer. They had a compromise, and we're going to help them. So it's a pretty big deal up north here, and I've got some folks flying out from my leadership team to help assist with the whole thing. So it's gonna be a nice switch up to be able to go see some folks in person
Yeah.
and help some people out who really need it.
Yeah.
So and then meet some of the folks in my organization at Microsoft, because there's no other consultants or architects or leaders in my kind of organization here in Calgary. So this will be the first time, and I got told I'll be taken out for lunch and dinner at least once from one of them. So we'll see how that rolls. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Start ramping back up, but it
I
looks
feel like
like
we should say, go. I'm sorry. I was just going to say we should tell everybody Rod is not here because he's not feeling well.
Yeah, Rod's sick. And Edward, thanks for powering through. It sounds like you have something going on as well. Um,
it's the smoke from Canada.
yeah, like I said, you got to deal with it. Too bad. If you want to,
Nah.
it is what it is. But maybe before we get into some, I know you wanted to talk about Entra and some other
Well,
cool
can
updates,
we
Andrea.
introduce our guest first?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yes. So just finishing up a sentence there. So Pranjal, who, sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, I hope I am. He achieved the benefit by winning one of the most elite awards in the overall Microsoft community, and that is the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Black Belt Award. And he also accumulated multiple other 2023 badges in our community for his consistent engagement and participation. And Pranjal decided to, as part of this milestone, he decided to join our lovely cast of crazy people on our show as a guest host. And I just want to say welcome and congratulations, sir. Do you want to do an introduction?
Yeah, thank you, buddy. So, I'm Pranjal Verma from India. So, I'm working in Inspira. So, currently, I'm working in different multiple projects. There are so many countries like Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and also I'm working on one response document for one of the client in Philippines. And like on a personal note, yesterday was my birthday. So,
Oh, happy
and
birthday!
yeah, thank you. And today I'm excited to be part of this podcast. So it's been excited and
Great.
Thanks so
eventful.
much.
Yeah.
We're happy to have you. Thank you for choosing us. The best podcast/show ever. All right. Um,
Ever.
ever to exist ever. All right, Andrea, Entra the Dragon. What's Entra? That sounds cool. What is that?
Well, I can tell you, I've already seen Twitter's been memed out for the last 2 days since Microsoft. We did a rebranding that everyone loves when we do that. So we're now calling pretty much anything that was Azure Active Directory is now going to be called Microsoft Entra. And it's Entra, like if anyone's old enough to remember the Nissan Sentra. It's not Entra like entree. So I'm gonna keep trying to say it right, but for some reason I feel compelled to call it Entra. But thank you, somebody posting that. But honestly, we just made a ton of announcements, not just the rebranding, but adding some new features. So what many people have been calling SASE, so the Secure Network Edge, we've introduced that as well. It's now Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Microsoft Entra Private Access as 2 new features, and you can kick the tires on those in your Azure tenant today if you go sign up for the preview. We'll probably go in deeper into some of the stuff, I think, over the next couple of weeks. But I don't know, Brody, Pranjal, Edward, anybody have anything interesting that they've learned about this new Entra stuff?
It looks like they're putting a lot of emphasis also on external identities, making the B2B experience much better, right? I thought it was going to include some stuff around making the Azure Lighthouse experience a little bit easier too, right? As far as being able to set up, identities on both sides and being able to have tenant access. But it's just so much. I was in the Entra webinar series just watching some of the stuff. I'm like, I didn't know it did all that, right? And I think there's going to be some improvements to the conditional access the way it does against identities. So I think it definitely warrants an expert to come on the show to talk about it, right? And I'm sure between me, you, Rod, and Andrew, we can find an expert to come on. Identity is not my strong point. It's it's not one of those things you can fake like you'll be found out trying to do it, right? But no, evidently must be important. They're throwing a lot of big names behind it and some effort behind it. So let's see what it's doing. How do you sign up for the preview, Andrea? Because I'm swinging and missing on that.
Oh, I will hang on. I will put the link in unless someone else has already done it. I will copy the link here into the chat. And anyone that would like to try it out can sign up there.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea.
I think that there are a bunch of internal stuff at Microsoft that's just kicking off primarily around sales and realignment and a few other things, role changes, name changes. But it's like I said, we probably need a show time to boil it down to make it consumable. We'll figure it out though. Brody, shouldn't this Entra be really in your wheelhouse? Your identity, yeah.
I've got a pretty large identity background because, when you start off your career in IT, it's Active Directory and Exchange, or at least it was when I was doing the thing. And then some of my first engagements at a partner before I joined Microsoft were almost all around identity and access management. And so while I haven't dabbled too hard in specific projects, I've mentored a few people on projects around it, and through that I've been able to get myself back up to speed. And moving forward into this post-breach compromise customer, identity is right at the forefront of everything we're going to be doing, really, along with some other items. So never a better time to get reacquainted with some new names and some new capabilities, because identity is important. Go figure. One of the 6 pillars of our Zero Trust framework.
One of the interesting conspiracy theories that everyone said about this huge identity, bet, that it is now put Active Directory on notice that this starts the deprecation that there will no longer be Active Directory in a number of years. It'll just be directory, and it'll be cloud based, right?
Sure.
That seems incredulous to Andrew and I. We've been doing this for so long. There'd be no way you can get rid of AD, right? But when you think about it, you probably will. You'll just have Entra on premise, right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I hear what's holding, but obviously enterprises have been around for a long time and they've got a huge on-prem footprint. But when I talk to some people about how do you eventually get rid of AD on-prem? And they're like, usually it's legacy applications, right? We've kind of solved for printers and other things, minutia, but it's legacy applications that are on-prem that need that localized identity and access IDP platform. When you can refactor them, or if you can expose them using Azure AD Entra application proxy, I suppose is what it's called now, then maybe you can move on at one point, and that's probably the most secure or a highly secure way of moving into a better posture in your organization, because you're kind of eliminating all those Active Directory, lateral movement attacks and escalation of privilege attacks, etc. So if you can get past that, eventually, it's probably the future. Whether it's going away in the next 25 years or not, I mean, that's a lot, right?
I compare conspiracies, buddy. Shout out to you, Franklin. He doesn't think it's nearly that long at all. I mean, he's talking about 5 to 7 years. You will not see AD. I'm like,
cool.
Okay, sure.
Cool. All right.
But that's it. I mean, we got a guest that's coming on, and I'd like to hear. This is probably gonna be one of the more controversial episodes, because we all got opinions around what this topic is going to be about. So, you want to bring our guest out of the green room before he drinks up all the beer, eats up all the snacks? Yeah. So, John,
welcome.
Mr. John O'Neill.
Welcome to the
Yeah,
show.
welcome.
Thanks, all. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to it. It's exciting, and I know nobody ever says the word exciting in the same sentence as insurance, but I'll do it. I'll break that barrier down.
Okay.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, yeah. So as you may have guessed, everybody listening and watching, John's going to be talking with us about cybersecurity insurance. This is a topic that guests and ourselves have kind of requested for quite some time now. So John, you're coming on. You're going to be literally the focal point for all of this. Maybe a follow-up is needed, but I think Pranjal, we're going to give you the opportunity to ask the first question as our awesome contest winner and extraordinaire. Do you have a cyber insurance question for Mr. O'Neill here?
Okay, so I will go first. My question is, as you worked in the industry for so many years, so how do you tackle the evolving changes and continue to learn the new things along with that?
So first off, Pranjal, congratulations again on earning those accomplishments this year. That's just awesome. I was really excited when I was hearing the intro in that, because we need that right now in the IT community, man. That is so important. But going to your point, I'll give everybody a little background, because as Brody mentioned, I followed a similar track. I began with Active Directory and Exchange, a lot of identity in my background. I'm older, thus I would say the lack of hair, but I don't want to include Edward in my conversation. So I'll just say that I go back to the NT days and that sort of thing. But in 2000, when Active Directory came, that's where we all lived, was figuring out how to do this identity and tying it to email and collaborative tools. And it was, we had viruses, so to speak, but we really didn't have the cybersecurity concern. They weren't driving anything. But you still had to learn all these things. And then as I got more involved and engaged with the business, as my career evolved, right, now I'm starting to really focus on the business or organizational challenges that technology is trying to be applied to. That I realized that, hey, this takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, just like you've been doing, right? You've put in a lot of work and a lot of effort in earning those badges and earning those accomplishments that you've done. It's the same side on the cyber insurance and that sort of thing. You just have to read and you have to engage. And I mean, I'm regularly meeting with insurance company underwriters and reading policies. A fellow MVP out of Calgary, actually, cool. Dave Kula, loves to say that nobody loves to read insurance policy fine print like I do. And I keep telling him that him and I must have a very different definition of love. But I do read them. And to give you an idea of the shift 5 years ago, the average cyber insurance policy was 1 to 5 pages. Today, the average cyber insurance policy, just your cyber insurance part, is 75 pages to 100.
Oh boy.
So what drove that? Well, the insurance companies didn't really know what they were getting into earlier, right? They thought, oh, this is a great market because remember, they're for profit and it's a good market, but they didn't really know things. And all of a sudden we started to get ransomware attacks and all these compromises and everything. And they're bringing in experts like yourselves and they're saying, hey, what happened here? We had to pay out a lot of money. What happened here? And they're like, well, that company didn't do this. That organization didn't take identity management serious, and they had 3 different identity databases, and people were sharing passwords and, you know, all those things that we cringe about. And so the insurance company started putting all that into their fine print, and it's evolved, but it's constant. I did a workshop about a year ago on cyber insurance, and I'm doing another one coming up next week, actually. You wouldn't believe how much the content has changed. A lot of the concepts are the same. I mean, insurance is insurance. Lloyd's of London, you know, from the point they started it to insure boats and their contents to now, that kind of concept is there. But what they're asking us for is the security professional, the IT professional, and what they did just a years ago is huge. So I'll hopefully I'll quiet here for a minute and see if we got another question.
Thank you.
So, John, you got to have a good guy, bad guy here. I'm gonna be the bad guy today.
Hey, bring it on. Red team, blue team.
As usual.
As usual. No, I'm really the good guy, but today's gonna be bad. So, is the increase in the paperwork an adjustment to the complexity of what you are having to cover from a liability perspective? And don't take this the wrong way. Or is it buyer beware? Right? Because I've heard some horror stories about, you know, you miss one small item, you know, as far as, you know, a requirement in there, you know, the cyber won't pay out the policy, right? Is it necessary complexity to go 75 pages? Because we understand the reason that you would do proper vetting and then, you know, systematic check-ins with the customer to make sure that they are meeting the requirements that initially got them underwritten. Why from, what did you say, the initial policy was 6 pages, now 75, 71 pages? Why the increase in the paperwork?
Well, so, and first off, I love that you're asking those questions because that's what I ask. My role isn't to help the insurance company. It's to help the IT pro and the organizations that the IT pros are working for to, one, obtain the cyber insurance policy that they want to give their organization protection. And then 2, and this is the part I consider more important, to ensure that when they need it, that policy will pay and will pay as quickly as possible, because that's what organizations are really going after here. Is they're like, hey, we learned this, unfortunately, in the aftermath of September 11th, where a lot of the physical structures, their DR centers were a couple blocks away, right? And so their entire DR centers were wiped. And I can't remember the exact figure, but there was this amazing number of companies that never got back up and running into operations before they had lost so much money that they essentially just went bankrupt and never came back. And that same kind of thing can happen with a ransomware attack or that sort of thing, right? And so you want to know that your cyber insurance policy will pay. Well, the carrier is a for-profit entity, right? They don't want to pay any more than they have to. And in fact, cyber insurance right now is such, remember I mentioned Lloyd's of London? So Lloyd's of London actually backstops, underwrites the underwriters, if you will, 20% of the world's cyber insurance policy. So 1/5 of them. And their recommendation to their membership base, if you will, is get out of cyber insurance. Don't do it. Because what they're afraid of is a cyber event could be large scale enough that it's essentially a hurricane or a massive disaster. Well, those events are backstopped by the government, right? So the insurance companies don't have to bear everything. When you have a hurricane, like Katrina or Florida or whatever, even though your insurance costs you a fortune, the insurance company itself only pays to a certain point, and then the government comes in. Well, there's no such thing for cyber insurance. So the insurance companies are on the hook for all of those damages on their own. And this is where the minutia comes in. I'm sorry, I always like to take the marathon route to my answer. And they are trying to take what they learned from the forensic analysts and the security consultants, and put that into the policy to ensure that their clients are doing these things, right? So there are MFA attestations. Now you have to say, if I have an email or anything based in the cloud, so I'm using Microsoft Entra. Thank you, because I was pronouncing it the wrong way. Now I'm going to think Centra all the time in my head. Anyways, if that's in the cloud, it has to be MFA, right? So if you're using Exchange Online, the account has to be MFA, and that's right in the attestation. Travelers Insurance is one that uses that, and other things like neglected software. They often have in those 75 pages. They have multiple pages that essentially dictate if a CVE is released and a patch is released for it, you have X amount of days to apply that patch to all your systems, or we are going to automatically start increasing your co-insurance, your deductible, if you will, decreasing the policy limit. So at the same time, you had $1 million coverage, and they say, in many cases, 30 days is where you take your first hit. So you haven't applied it within 30 days. Now that million is going to drop to $750. That's your maximum coverage that they're going to pay out. And they increased your deductible from $100,000 to $150,000. And at 45 days, it goes down again. And some of these neglected software sections essentially wipe out your coverage at 90 days, right? 3 months. How many of us know organizations that take longer than 3 months to get a patch applied? Yeah, we all do. And those are the companies that, because they don't read the fine print, they have a compromise and they go to get paid from the insurance company, and the insurance company brings in their team of experts who look at what you said you do when you made the application versus what they find. And they go, I'm sorry, we're not going to pay you right now. And you can argue with them and get lawyers and everything else. But remember, the clock is ticking and you're having to write checks and not getting anything from the insurance company to make you whole. You may not last that time. So
before this, and definitely, you said two interesting things. But before I ask these questions, help me understand where you sit. Are you a client advocate, or are you an advocate of the insurance? I can't quite figure out where you reside on this, because the way you just described it, cybersecurity, sounds like snake oil. I always thought it was. I thought it was a status or a badge of I checked it when nobody else did it. So maybe this made my organization look better that I had cyber insurance. But you're absolutely right. Why would you be in the cybersecurity business when you look at conventional insurance? Take Allstate, for example. They no longer cover California in certain instances. Like, we're done with California. Floods, fire, locusts. Florida's the same, Andrew? Wow. Well, so they like, this is a losing
hurricanes, floods.
Yeah. So, you know, it is a public record. You know, Equifax had cyber insurance. They spent it, what, 3 days? You know, and we're in the hole. So who are you advocating for? Are you advocating that, yes, cyber, but understand the nuances, or no, because it doesn't get you anything?
So I am a client advocate, right? I'm a CIO of a manufacturing firm and technology consultant. So I'm always looking at what protects the client. And I do believe cyber insurance helps make many organizations whole. So it has a place and a purpose, just like car insurance does, that sort of thing. But I also don't believe, if you're going to be an organization where you just get it to make yourself feel better, you just check the boxes right on the application and get it to feel better, why waste that money? Invest it in something else in your organization, right? If you're going to invest the money it takes to get cyber insurance coverage, then you have to step up and bury yourself in the trenches and figure out, I'm going to get covered if I need it, right? And that's difficult. And a lot of organizations don't want to do that because it's like all aspects of cybersecurity. You now have to start dumping resources into that, pushing, IT pro time to it and investment to it. And they're like, well, I made the investment in the insurance, and that's not enough. So I do believe that from the standpoint of protecting an organization, so from the client perspective of what protects me in the event of a successful attack, insurance has its place if you've done the work to make sure it'll cover you. I could care less whether an insurance company makes $1. In fact, I think they're the bane of all existence.
Well, you went for me being about to say that was a very CIO-ish answer to the way you closed it. Like, okay, that's about up. He's telling like it is, because cybersecurity became a joke when you start having these managed XDR, MSSPs using it as part of their marketing and sales thing. It became a joke, right? And so, yeah, you can already figure out which side I am on this. So I'll let somebody else talk about it, right?
So, John, there was a great question in the comments by our friend Noodle. Love to hear your answer. The question, for those that are just listening and not watching, the question is, what does cyber insurance pay for? Does it pay the ransom and fund the hackers, or does it just pay for the loss of revenue?
So this is one of those ones where, unfortunately, brace yourself, you're about to get a CIO answer. And it is all of the above or none of the above. It depends on the policy you get and what you negotiate and what you understand is in the policy. Again, we all know how insurance brokers and such operate. They will sell us and tell us it covers everything from loss of business revenue to physical damages to whatever, when in reality, it just gives us X amount of money to pay for the forensic recovery and that's it. So you really have to understand what you're buying, and it is a buyer beware type thing. But there's when I go in and I negotiate a policy with a broker or whatever, they tend not to like it because I ask a bunch of those pesky things called questions. And I ask them things like, for instance, there's been malware that essentially allowed an attacker to increase the temperature in a blast furnace over in Europe. Brody probably knows about this. And it burnt the building down. So now you've got literally a physical building destruction, not something we typically think of when we think of cybersecurity, right? We're not thinking of, oh, wow, the brick and the mortar is going to ground. And most policies wouldn't cover that. They'd say, well, that's your property insurance coverage. And the property insurance then tries to get out of it by saying, well, it was a cyber attack. And so I'm like, no. I need to see that that's covered as the result of the cyber attack. And they don't like that because that can get really expensive really quick. And if you have to relocate or rebuild, now you've got business interruption insurance in there. And I ask questions that may be even more annoying than that, such as, hey, how are you going to help me be whole again from the reputational damage? Mm-hmm. I serve a customer who I make $10 million a year from, right? And all of a sudden I've been ransomware attacked. Come on. I don't think any of us are naive enough to think that customer, the next time they have a new product or negotiation, isn't second guessing whether I'm the right partner to do that, right? Am I exposing their data? Am I exposing them to risk or whatever? So how do you quantify that? How do you get money back from that? I mean, and you have to ask these questions, and I just take the approach of let's go at it head on. And sometimes what it comes down to is a customer or client is talking to an insurance broker, and the insurance broker is like, no, we're not going to cover any of those things. And I just tell them, well, then this isn't the insurance policy for you, because the type of attack that they're actually going to help you be whole from is like this many of the attacks that we see out there right now.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I got a follow-up, John, and then maybe one after if I'm not, if that's okay with everybody. So that it's interesting because I've heard that some providers now need to be aware of the fact that if they do cover for ransom, they could be violating sanctions laws because they could be directly funding, an APT or a group in a foreign country that is by law you're not supposed to be doing any type of business with, donating to, et cetera, et cetera. So do you see that coming up in your experiences or conversations lately?
Actually, I have, and I've seen it come up in small town organizations where they just paid the ransom and they thought this is the way out of it. And unfortunately, it was a organization that was on the terrorist watch list, which is illegal in the United States, right? You're breaking the law if you pay any of those organizations anything. And it's like I tell my kids that there's a period at the end of that sentence. There isn't a comma and a but or an if, right? Because that's what everybody wants to combine. But I was shut down, but I couldn't make money. No, it was, you're not allowed to do this, period. Right? There was no but in there. And yes, I don't have any experiences where I can tell you like they've really, the government has come down on these companies hard, with fines or that sort of thing. But would I want to take that risk? I would not. Because someday they might decide to make an example out of somebody, and I'm Irish, so I have Irish luck, which means I'll be the one they make the example out of.
Yeah, copy that. Okay, thank you for providing clarity on that. That's really interesting. All right, so just pivoting, and this comes from our friend Rod Trent, who again's sick, and he's feeding me smart questions. But I'm going to give him full credit on this one. John, how, in your opinion, how will AI fit into insurance and regulations? And could AI be a rider on cybersecurity insurance in the future?
So, like many things with AI right now, I think all throughout IT, we're trying to figure out where AI fits in our organizations, right? Where it brings value and where it brings risk. And of course, like most things, my experience tells me that most of our users they just want to use it for everything. And when it blows up in their face, blame IT, right?
Typical.
Yeah. So I don't think the insurance company has enough data. Remember when I mentioned the 5-page thing back in the day because they didn't know? I think that's where they are right now. But as soon as we start to see AI-born threats or successful compromises, as soon as folks like yourself, Brody, are able to come back and say, yeah, the vector of attack was, using ChatGPT or effectively, getting somebody to type a query in a way and then malforming the response or something like that. As soon as that starts to happen, the insurance companies will grab hold of it and start to lock out the things that create the higher risk.
Fair. Okay. So it's a bit of a reactive. We're going to wait until something happens. And then once it does, it's like, okay, now we've got to put the effort in to deal with this moving forward.
So
Fair.
I think like right now, if you were the victim of the attack, if you're the first one, you're going to be okay. You're going to be covered because there's nothing in there that's slicing it out. Right. But I think that a year from now or 2 years from now, at the rate AI is going, it's going to be a different story. We'd be having a different conversation. That's just an opinion, but.
Yeah, copy that. Thank you for that. Pranjal, do you have a question, sir?
Yeah. So how does the policy handle claims involving cloud services or outsourced IT infrastructure?
So this is a great one, Pranjal, because from their perspective, it's all about what you said you were doing at what level you said you were doing it and versus what actually happened. So if you're saying, hey, I MFA access to all my network devices, because that's actually a question that comes up on an application. And I guess I should just take a second to let everybody know, because a lot of people, I go through this at a lot of my conferences. I don't know. Did you guys know that your application, the moment a policy is issued, your application becomes legal text of that policy. So anything you stated on that application, even if they didn't spell it out in the policy text, that application becomes part of it. So if they ask the question, you know, do you MFA access to your routers and switches? It's a real one. Like I said, Traveler Chubb, I think, asked that one, some other ones. And you say, you know, you go into this answer and you say, yes, all devices have proper MFA access controlled through our, you know, federated identity management system, whatever. And you get really detailed with them because you're thinking from the context of the switches and routers that sit at your organization. But then you have a compromise in your cloud where you're using IaaS, you have some infrastructure as a service. They're going to come back to you and they're going to, wait a minute, you said all this stuff was MFA'd. You need to prove to us that where the event happened, where you're wanting us to pay for, had that level of coverage. So this is where, unfortunately, you got to play this little legal tic-tac-toe game, I guess you would call it, with them, or dance, where you're going to be hyper specific with your answer. Yes, our on-prem infrastructure devices are MFA'd. Period.
Interesting.
They want to come back and ask another question. What do you mean by that? Well, I mean that our cloud ones I can't speak to because that's why I'm paying for the cloud infrastructure as a service so that I don't have to worry about it.
Within insurance companies that offer this particular service, what's the competence level? Who is vetting these things? Because it sounds like you need a legal department before you can buy insurance. Because somebody on your legal department needs to vet this. Who can vet this stuff?
So this is where it gets. I shouldn't say this is where. It's what they do is you tend to deal with a broker at the front end of it who just is somebody who wants to sell insurance policies, right? Worst person to ask about the details because they're going to give you the answers they think get you to buy the policy. But then when you fill out the application, they have to get it underwritten. So they send it back to the underwriter and the underwriter looks at it and the underwriter really doesn't know either. So they it's kind of the old, way back at the beginning of my career, you know, when they were still inventing fire. I worked on the help desk and you had the knowledge base, right? Where you really weren't paid to think, you were paid to look it up, try what was there. And if it didn't work, escalate it. And so that's kind of how the underwriter is. And then if they say no, and you're like, wait a minute, I have more, what inevitably ends up happening, and I have this happen, I've had this happen a number of times over the last couple of years, you end up talking to their forensic consultant, the person they pay to be a cybersecurity expert, right? And you have to explain things to them. Like one of the questions, this is a crazy one. They wanted MFA on any printer that was considered business critical. Yeah. How many of them HP Office jets do we have that support MFA?
Yeah.
I paid $90 for this thing. I don't think they're spending a lot of money on this stuff. And they're like, well, is it business critical? And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, I guess if it's just used for you to, you know, print off the NCAA bracket, then it's not business critical. But if you're using it to print invoices that are necessary to bill your customer, that's business critical. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we have printers that don't have MFA on them. But what is it you're concerned with? Because it has to have some level of administrative access for it to really be a problem. So we don't have that turned on. What are you worried about? And then you've got that expert that's a Brody that's working for the insurance company, and he goes, yeah, that's fine, right? And then the underwriter says, okay, well, we'll make an exception. And they write it, and it comes back up it, or it kind of climbs back up the ladder. But it's a pain in the butt, and it takes a lot of time.
Well, if Brody's your expert, you're done. Right?
Thanks,
So-
bud.
Yeah, you got to get the New Year dig. I it's a thing. It was a shiny thing, and so, Mr. O'Neill, do you own a car?
I do.
Or you're a safe driver?
Um, Opinions vary,
Do you have insurance?
of course.
Does your insurance carrier offer you cash back or savings if you are a safe driver with no incidents?
They do.
Does cybersecurity do that? It's insurance.
They do, but not in the direct dollar sense. Just like many insurance companies, you have property insurance. They offer cash back if you have a sprinkler system, but it's
Mhm.
not a fixed number. It's not like they say, well, put in a sprinkler system for $10 million and we'll give you, you know, 9 million back or whatever. It's your premiums will go down. And and I'm always pushing them and asking them, even in that scenario, well, by how much? Because I need to know how much before I make an investment. Because if it's going to cost me 10 and I'm going to get 9, even my math skills tell me that one doesn't work out to my advantage.
Mhm.
And it's the same kind of thing with safety. You go proactively. One of my strategies that I always tell people to do is take every single investment you make. You bought new switches this year. Write that down. You bought new servers. Write that down. And when you go to get your insurance policy, you show them, this is the investment I'm making in new, up-to-date, supported hardware. I'm putting on my network. I'm doing these things, right? Look, I made a $250,000 investment. They won't come back and tell you how much reduction that's going to make on the premium. But I've had them tell me off the record that, one, it increases your odds of getting approved or underwritten.
Okay.
And two, it does decrease your premiums. And I can say that one policy this last year, in an era where insurance premiums have been going up, I actually was able to get it reduced by about 2%, which doesn't seem much, but when you consider it's a $250,000 premium and the average increase this last year was 5%, a 2% reduction is some dollars, right? And the response back to me, Edward, from the carrier was that it was because of what we were showing, not what we were saying we were doing, but what we were showing we were doing.
I can appreciate your example, and I think I know where you were going with it, but a new server, sure. I mean, that doesn't make it inherently more secure. A new switch doesn't inherently make it no secure because you're not securing the hardware. You're securing the software that runs on it and the possible unknown bugs that could lead to a compromise in it. I mean, I'm on the side that if I was selling cyber insurance, I would be telling you through the high heavens why you should have it, right? It makes you feel good. It makes you feel safe. It makes you seem like you're being diligent. But I still have yet to see, tell me, is there a regulation or a enforcement that tells any specific company and or industry that they have to have it? I don't think it's required.
No, it is not.
Okay.
And to the point of hardware, that's part of that 75 pages you asked about earlier. There's a whole section in there about unsupported hardware. And if you have unsupported hardware the manufacturer has said is end of life or end of support, it will reduce your premiums or your policy limits and increase your deductibles. So that's why showing them I'm getting new, fully supported hardware that's under warranty.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course, we all know what that means is that means that they're developing bug fixes for compromised firmware or that sort of thing. When it's unsupported, they're not developing those things. The insurance company just doesn't word it that way. They say if it's unsupported, it needs to go bye-bye. So that's why I use those numbers. Mm-hmm. And my thing is I'll put everything in there, let them weed out what they don't care about. Right? Sure. I'd rather include everything than miss something that they would have valued that they don't put in there. But there is no regulation that says you need it. So this is why it's a very organizational dependent thing. I can tell you I've been part of post-compromise recoveries where if they wouldn't have had some form of insurance, they wouldn't exist anymore because it shut down production. Okay. And they couldn't ship product. They can't bill the customer, and they don't have the cash reserves to keep paying their payroll, to doing those things. It's just it's a matter of time, right? It's why in DR, what have we done for years? RPOs and RTOs, right? There's fixed numbers of what you can take. And you have to define those because they're unique to you. But yeah, there are cases where I think it has really helped. I will tell everybody this: if you're a for-profit business, your average ransom is way higher. If you're a government entity, it is way lower. So the highest average ransom right now is in manufacturing, $2 million. Think about it. Manufacturers have to keep manufacturing to make money. If they're not manufacturing, they're not making money, they go out of business, they just don't exist. People are out of work, it's done. Government and healthcare are the lowest, usually about 150,000, I think was the last number I saw, because we had one here, hospital. They were essentially locked out of their systems and shut down for 6 weeks. But a hospital that's nonprofit doesn't tend to go out of business. They sent all their people home without paychecks, and they put them on unemployment and that sort of thing. But they came back and they got back up and going. And so the attackers know that. So they adjust their ransoms accordingly.
Yeah.
And
They have a I won't say unarmed thieves mentality, but they understand, the levels of what you can ask for and what escalation looks like. Because it used to be that, it was unspoken that you don't touch healthcare and you don't touch education.
Right.
All bets are off now, right? So hypothetically, you're at a company, you get ransomware, your insurance pays out. Do they drop you, or do you drop yourself because the premium is now through the roof?
Right now, all my experiences tell me you're not getting underwritten again the next year.
Yeah.
You're done.
And do insurance companies talk to one another so they know if okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Centralized database. Yeah. I had one more question on the sticky piece. MSSPs are managed security, companies that, and I can't name a name on here, that definitely gets us in trouble, but these places that will manage your security and your alerting, are their insurance, highly different from what you can buy as an end consumer? Because if they are guaranteeing you with SLAs and everything and they miss something, do you happen to have any insight on, and I don't know if your company uses a security partner, but what happens if one of those, they just like, oh my God, we did not see that. This is our bad. Our bad doesn't do it.
So that's a great point, Edward. That's so great. So first off, I'm sure that we could talk about this one. So Defender Threat Experts, right? And I use them, and I actually use them to lower insurance premiums, because you show the insurance company, hey, we have this level behind us, this expertise, we're investing in it. Again, it's just like that hardware or software I talked about. We're now putting that down on these are the investments we made list. Okay. And there you go. So that works to your advantage. But from the MSSP side, from the other side of it, they have a much harder time getting insurance policies, because they're essentially, when they have a compromise, they're a hurricane victim.
Yeah.
Right. They have so many customers that are going to be affected by that the insurance company is going to be on the hook to pay out losses for, that they don't want to insure the MSSP, because, it could be exponentially larger than a single infection or a single compromise.
Particularly when, Andrew, you remind me of this, wasn't there the going thing that managed service providers weren't securing the stuff with CSPs, and they were getting compromised, so it was downhill from there? Yeah. It was a while back.
It was Mimecast, that I was just trying to think. Wasn't it the Mimecast event that in Canada took out a lot of
no,
MSSPs?
I think this was more along just MSPs, period. That were either CSPs and had the keys to the kingdom, and they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They got compromised, and it was it was just compounding after that because
Yeah.
they had whatever access to it. So give me and you said that you can't quite cut the cybersecurity, cyber insurance off at the legs because you've given some examples where they had saved companies. So it seems like mileage may vary. You really have to do your due diligence to figure out, what's the benefit of you having it. Because my biggest thing is this: we always tell everybody, and you sit in the boardroom, and maybe you've thrown this out before, or your CISO has, assume breach, but nobody prepares for the breach. Nobody wants to spend money on it, right? So you're going to assume it, but you don't want to do it. So, if you had to give three, three top things that you should really look out for, or make sure that these things are covered before you put paper, what just arbitrarily, they could either be you or something that you talk to some of your CIO colleagues out in the field. What three things that you need to do to make sure that you tip an incident in your favor to get you paid quickly?
So the top one is whatever you put on that application, make sure you're doing every bit of it, because that's the first thing they look at post-compromise before they pay, right? Is what you said you're doing versus what you are doing. They don't so much go in and look to make sure you're meeting every detail of the 75 pages or whatever it is, but they look at the application, and that's why the applications now are more pages, because they ask very specific questions that then they use to evaluate. So number one, whatever your answers are to those questions, don't tell them the answer they want to give you the policy. Give them the truthful answer, because otherwise you're just spending money to make yourself feel better, right? They're not going to pay out. Don't waste the money. Second, make sure that you're doing the obvious things. And I know this sounds like such a cop-out answer, but I would ask the four of you, how many times do we each see some organization where they're not following the basics of, not sharing passwords or disabling MFA because it's the CEO and he doesn't want to be bothered with it?
Often.
Those kind of things, they can make or break how the response goes post-compromise.
And if I had to speak for my co-host on here, Andrea, I can tell you what her pet peeve is. Why didn't you patch? Right off the bat, she don't chew your head off. She doesn't want to talk to you if you didn't patch, right?
Exactly, and Henry, it's multiple pages in every policy I've read for the last 2 years is this neglected software, which is essentially, if a patch is released, put it on. And everybody's like, well, it'll break our systems or it'll slow it down. Don't care. It was released for a reason. Put it on. It's a period, not a comma and a but, right?
Right.
A patch is released, put it on. So I'm with you on that. I'm the first one. The other thing, Edward, the third tip I'm going to get is shift your cultural response. So you mentioned kind of the cultural zero trust, assume breach, those kind of things that we do. I tell people, isolate, then investigate. You need to get your teams into the mode where their response to a possible compromise is first isolate, then investigate. And in too many cases, it's the other way around, right? Well, I don't want to disrupt the chief of marketing, so even though I got an alert out of Defender, I'm not going to do anything. Nope. I'll tell you a story. One of the security pros that works for me, our cybersecurity manager, my account, I was doing a PowerShell remote command on a server. And normally I would tell her in advance and she'd be all good or whatever. And I forgot to mention something, right? Because I'm multitasking. And she saw it and got the alert and locked me out. And when she called me, I could tell she was like about to cry. And I'm like, all I'm going to do is congratulate you. You did exactly what I wanted you to do. I don't care if it's me. I don't care if it's a CEO or whatever. It's isolate, then investigate. If it's nothing, release them.
The bigger question is you give her a raise?
Absolutely. Not maybe at that exact moment, but
Okay.
she earned it because she takes the good approach. And Andrea, I'm betting that you have loads of stories where IT pros particularly are afraid of that because they work for organizations where maybe they don't get the support they need or whatever. And in those organizations, I tell not the IT people but the executives that if they want to spend money to make themselves feel better and say we're insured but not follow these guidelines IT gives them, they could save that money and spend it on a new car because it's not doing them any good.
Fair, Bud.
Well, I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up. I do think someone had an interesting comment in the chat, which was, is cyber insurance more popular in the US or Europe? Or do you see in Asia? Is there any place where it seems to be more
US.
market is growing?
US.
Really?
Definitely
I would
US.
call Europe. That's great.
Yeah. Europe. Yeah, I mean, Europe has a lot of growth, but the US is on the forefront of pushing it for need right now, just because so many companies are getting laid waste to.
Pwned. Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
no, for sure.
I should say North America, not the US. North America, because Canada has a big thing going right now too. So.
Thank you. We're not immune. Another question from Adrian on LinkedIn was just super quick before we wrap up here. What is the most common fine print that we should watch out for when negotiating with cyber insurance? I thought that was an interesting one.
So the fine print you want to watch is the post-compromise response rules. Most organizations I go to, they think that once they're compromised, they can dictate how the response is to make it as fast for them or possible or whatever. A lot of policies state you're not allowed to touch anything until you notify them, and then they will bring in their vetted consultant. So you may have a trusted partner, somebody you work with regularly, right? And you want to call them in to help get you up as fast as possible. And the insurance company's like, sorry, they're not on our list. You have to bring in, this company or this company and this company. And if you touch anything, now we're back to what Edward and I were talking about earlier. We're not going to pay. We're certainly not going to pay quickly.
Wow.
So
That's
watch
super
that fine
interesting.
print.
Never knew that.
Yeah.
It makes sense that they want to come in and I don't want to be the naysayer, prove your negligence.
Yep.
Yeah. Or they have a deal with, a Mandiant or a CrowdStrike or a Microsoft, and they want to keep working with them. Man, that could really turn a response time situation, right? Because like you got your people and they're going to come in same day, but like maybe this other company, they're going to come in tomorrow, and by that time it's a situation.
And real quick, I know we're wrapping up, but where you can really see that is a lot of those same policies don't provide any business interruption insurance, because by not providing business interruption insurance as part of the policy, they really don't care how long you're down. They're not covering that aspect of it. So you need to make sure that stuff's not in there, because it can have nasty results for you. But for anybody out there that does have a trusted partner, if you get on the front end of it and you talk to your insurance company, there is a process you can go to and you can get them vetted and you can get them added to the list, but you have to do it pre-compromise. You can't do it after the fact.
And it sounds like if you don't do that, you have to use their trusted experts.
Yep.
And then they come get some yahoos off the street like me and Brody, and you're down for another month because I right on both of us, self-deprecated this time. Right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was just going to say, I don't know if everyone is aware that's listening, but Microsoft now has an incident response retainer. So
Sure
you get prepaid blocks of hours for our specialized incident response services. So that's something that we're kind of new offering. So, and that's what we used to call our former DART team. So that's really great.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that on the show. I have a peculiar interest in that lately, right? So I'd like to talk about that. This has been super informing, right? Because
Yes.
my knowledge or my perceived knowledge around that was highly opinionated, right? I've never read a policy, never been part of someone that had to exercise the policy. So to hear it from you, I hope your carrier is not listening and comes aside to void you out, right? Like, is that right? We're done with you, Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, insightful conversation. A lot of great questions from us and from the community there. I learned a ton.
Yeah,
Like
me
in
too.
closing, is there a question that you wish we asked but didn't? Like, is there one last tidbit you want to leave our guests and listeners with?
Thanks for that opportunity, and I'm going to start by saying thanks to each of you. This has been a lot of fun and a blast, and I truly enjoy it, because if anyone listening or participating gained any edge that will help them get protected, then this was super worth it, because that's what this is all about. And that's the kind of ending comment, the question that I would say that, if I was asking myself, it would be really, what's the real cost if I don't go read these boring things or do these boring things? Is it really gonna bite me? And my answer is yes, it is. This is one of those unfortunate things that just we have to do, right? It's like when we're kids and we have to clean our room before we're allowed to go out and play with our friends or that kind of thing. That's this. Now, I try and take and digest it and share it in a way that hopefully makes it easier for colleagues and that sort of thing to do conversations like this. But for everybody out there, take the time to know what your organization has in terms of a policy. If you're in IT, you have a role in security, right? I don't care if you're a developer. I don't care if you're the cybersecurity pro or the help desk manager. You have a part in your organization's security. So you could benefit from understanding, what are we going to be covered for? What's going to make us whole in this policy and what's not? Mm-hmm. And it's boring and it's ugly and
necessary, apparently.
Someone made a jokingly comment up in the things that said you could use AI to go in and read the fine print for you. that may not be such a joke.
Yeah. Summarize. Yeah. Tell me why I'm covered. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me what my coverage gaps are, or something like that. John, it sounds like you and I could spin up a business and become cybersecurity insurance policy reviewers. And then we can charge them, about policy on that policy and do that, right?
Wow, I love how your mind's working.
He's always thinking.
Yeah,
hey, I'm a seller.
That's right.
Yeah, sell it. Well, Mr. O'Neill, thank you so much. This why was not, super technical. It was very processed, and I think the things that people can't touch, do, break, install, click on, they don't really see the importance of it. But you setting yourself up if you really don't take a serious interest rather than checking the box when you go out and you spend this money. Because I would hate to be in front of you as your director of cybersecurity and have to explain, Edward, you told me to sign off on this. Thank you. Give me your keys, your badge, and your laptop. And you got to really do it. So we still haven't had a definitive no or yes, and that's okay. Right.
And if you don't mind, I want to put one other comment out there. It's about perspective, and it's the perspective that I use. I remind myself that when a compromise happens and the organization has to conserve cash, who it hits are the frontline workers. So the people in the warehouse, the people in the offices, they're the ones that are sent home without a paycheck. And I'm watching them, and I always try and remind myself the perspective is if I have to watch that, because it may happen, I want to know in my heart that I did everything I could think of and everything you could think of that you told me to prevent that, right? If I look at them and I go, you know what? I just really wasn't interested in spending an extra hour after work reading a policy or something like that. That's going to bug me for a long, long time. So I try to keep that perspective driving me.
And that's what leaders do versus managers. Absolutely.
Good point.
Leaders
I want to give a shout out to Pranjal as well for joining us. Thanks for joining us as our guest host. And congratulations again. We really appreciated you. And you had some great questions there. Nailed it. So thanks, bud. You could come on more often, as far as I'm concerned.
If we get those, we'll send them your way. People ask these questions. I want to ping you out of band, Mr. O'Neill. I want to ask you a couple of questions on some of the things you talked about. But not
absolutely, anytime, Edward. I love it.
Yeah.
I'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes, sir. Thanks a lot. And Rod says, sorry I couldn't make it. So thanks again for taking the time to talk.
Tell him to feel better. Feel better, Rod.
Something's going around. I'm actually drinking ginger beer.
I like ginger beer on its own, man. It's good. I actually got one downstairs. I'm going to pop that as soon as I'm done this call.
I just wanted some fuzzy. Thanks to all our listeners. Thanks for coming in, listening to us, watching us. You know, we are doing the good deeds. We had a real good security citizen here. I like the way he closed the show about it's not me and my job, it's how me not doing my job will affect the people down the line. I love the way you close that piece right there, right? Stay tuned. Good things coming up. More guests. We're going to change show up a little bit, do some things, more announcements. Au revoir.
Good night.
Au revoir.
Ciao.
Oh, I got to do the thing.
Bye, everyone.
Hold on.
Mm.